decided to come on the air this weekend. We know it's a holiday weekend, but have lots to discuss between Shane and myself here this morning. We've been talking about before we went live. We've been talking a little bit about the tariffs that are possibly coming against Canada and Mexico, and what the potential impact could be. Please, in the comments, provide your comments on what you think the impact is. Shane, I actually dropped some polls this morning across several of the industry channels. I haven't dropped a poll in a while, but certainly people have a lot to say. A lot of votes are coming in. It's certainly not statistically relevant, but people in our industry have a lot to say about it in terms of what the impact would be. So while we get to it, Shane, what are you hearing? What are you thinking in terms of what you think the impact will be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an opportunity for a lot of brands to, I don't want to say reassess their costs, but just pay attention to their costs. I think it's something that I've run into with brands where maybe they don't pay attention to their costs on an ongoing basis as much as they should, where they develop a new product and shoot, it could be a core product. It's been 3 or 4 years. Maybe if they're lucky, once a year, they look at their costs and how they. I think the economy in the last few years, it's been fluctuating enough that you should be paying attention to your costs on an ongoing basis and how it plays in the market, right? And I think it's a point to where you have to look at what you're doing and say, do we need to play in a different price point? Do we need to adjust our products or our recipes? I think that's the most positive way to look at it, because I do think they're going to have an impact one way or another. But use it as a positive to say, maybe there's ways we can get more efficient. Maybe there's ways that we can adjust our recipe and our overall value prop and our business model to be more competitive. I just think, to me, that they're definitely going to have an effect, but that's the most positive way that you can spin it.
It's interesting you say that, because I think it was USA Today. I read an article, and what they were saying is the impact is not necessarily going to be all the goods that are coming from Mexico or Canada. Actually, the producers here are going to look at their pricing, and they're going to adjust their pricing. So if they see that if you're making a said product here in the U.S., and there's a product coming across the border, and we know that this is going to be more than Mexico and Canada, by the way, but they're going to look at that, and they're going to look at the category, and if they can command a price, they will. Or they have to reduce their price, maybe they will. They can find more efficiencies. So it's an interesting perspective for sure. I definitely think there's going to be an impact on costs, though. Where the producers are going to make a decision on costs, and then the materials that they use to make their products of these tariffs go into effect will go up.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that brands tend to look at it negatively, but see how you can spin it as a positive to say, I have heard a couple of brands, honestly, in the past week tell me, well, we can't continue to put out a product of this quality if our costs go up. I mean, costs have been rising pretty significantly for the past 4 or 5 years. Maybe you do have to knock down your quality a little bit, but maybe on the other end, there's a way that you can adjust your brand strategy. But yeah, I would think that costs are going to go up, and the market doesn't lie. Like I always tell people that if your suppliers think that they can get more money, if they can raise their costs and still drive sales, they're going to do it. It's on you as a business to adjust, right? Because if they can't get that extra money, they'll have to bring it back down. But if they can, it's because somebody in the market's willing to pay it. So you've got to adjust.
Yeah. My concern is Mexico, tequilas, and beers.
Yeah.
Modelo, I believe Modelo is the top beer in the world. I think, they're absolutely crushing it. If there's a 25% tariff on Modelo, do you think people are going to continue to buy Modelo at a 25% increase?
I had this conversation with someone yesterday. I'm not I don't think that they're going to buy it at a 25% increase. I think it's going to be on Modelo to adjust, whether they shift their production. If I put myself in Modelo's shoes, the thing that I would struggle with is, let's say that we shift a bunch of our production to the U.S., right? We can save that way. We can not have to go full 25% markup. We can save on the cost. There's a very real chance that 4 years from now, that could shift back, and you've invested all of this money to shift your production to the U.S. So that's the part that I would struggle with when you're operating a brand that's or an organization that's not as agile because it's so big, to have to shift back and forth, there's real considerations there. I would think they'd try and find a way to keep their costs down because, $50 for a case of Modelo to me is just not going to fly.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what people do. I went through this several years ago. And we obviously, as a distributor, took a position on inventory, especially on like scotches. I know we're talking about Mexico and Canada, but maybe distributors need to take a position on some of their tequilas, maybe take a position on some of their beers, but they're not going to be able to take more than 6 months on the floor, right? And maybe the idea is that they weather the storm, because what they're saying is a reason that this is going into effect is because they're trying to obviously protect the borders. I'm not here to talk about politics, but that's the reason. People are coming in the country. Drugs are coming in the country. At least that is the narrative that's happening and why they're doing it. Mexico straight up said that they're not going to. They're going to leave their borders open. Which is interesting. So a little bit of a trade war starting to brew there. It seems like in Canada, the Prime Minister, I think that's what you refer to the Canada leader, is that they want to work with our leadership here in America. What do you think about job losses? Do you think that this will impact jobs in our industry?
It's interesting. I think obviously the goal here is to drive job creation by motivating the production and the businesses to be based in the U.S. as much as possible. I think you mentioned inventory. I think it's going to be interesting. I would think that companies like Modelo are going to see a sales bump before the tariffs go into effect because people are going to try to load up on inventory while the costs are still lower. But I don't know. I think on the whole, it'll be fine. I think I just have a strong feeling that Modelo is going to find a way to adjust. They're just too big and too good at what they do. In any job loss, I think you would pick up somewhere else for different brands. I read something where Anheuser-Busch said I think 95% of the beer that they sell in the U.S. is produced in the U.S. or using raw materials from the U.S., so it's not going to affect them too much. I just think these organizations are so big, they're going to and successful, good at what they do, that they're going to find a way to adjust.
The shift is interesting because there was I'll name the poster nameless, but I did respond to him. But he had mentioned that his brand is going to actually benefit from this because he's made in America. Mm-hmm. Maybe so. I don't know. I would think, but I also think you just said it. I think people are going to not only the distributors, but I think the consumer is going to pantry load. They're going to be like, oh man, I got to go get my Modelo or whatever said product or my tequila that I love because I don't want to pay that increased cost. So you probably will get some benefit, but I do think over time if these stay in really, I think that people are going to have to reduce headcount because they're not going to need people on the production line. Things will slow the whole bit. I hate to be negative, but I do think there's going to be an impact. At least the Beer Institute says it. That's my source.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see it. Every year Bud raises their prices, or almost every year, and people say, "Oh, they're going to stop buying it." I used to hear it from the Bud reps when I did retail. They're going to stop. Bud keeps raising, people are going to stop buying it, and they just keep buying it. Like obviously they took a hit from the snafu a couple of years ago, but that had nothing to do with price raise.
Yeah.
I just think now Modelo may lose a little bit of share, but I think somebody else would pick it back up. I just.
Who's going to, the category, we've been talking about this for a while, is that there's a shift in what consumers are buying, right?
Yeah.
Does this tariff push the consumer even further to say, you know what, I'm going to get my THC hemp-based product made here in America, and I'm going to pay $19.99 for my 4-pack, which is expensive, by the way. But you know what? I'm not going to have the hangover the next day, and I'm not saying everybody gets hungover when they drink. But does this push them over the edge? Does this turn that ripple into a tsunami where people are like, you know what? I can get this. It's made in America. I'm not paying an additional 25%. And by the way, the 25% tariff, it probably translates to a much higher price, by the way. It might be 30, 50%. I'm not sure. But I mean, I think of the consumer, this might push the consumer over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some of that. COVID did it with craft beer, where it kind of accelerated the maturation of the market. I don't think that anybody had it as a conscious thought. It's just circumstances led to it. I could see something like that a little bit. I just find it hard to believe that a year from now we're going to be sitting here and a case of Modelo is going to be $55. This is not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I hope NBWA, WSWA, these, I've been members of both for many, many, many years. And I hope that they're talking to our legislators. I'm not even sure how it works. I think the president can just pull the tariffs. I don't think he needs approval to do that. But I could be wrong. Again, not politics here. But it's definitely weighing on my mind. Work with many brands, many tequilas, and tequilas are maybe it's just a price adjustment because the cost of agaves come down. Maybe it just keeps pricing more stable in terms of what we do. I mean, I'm not going to, we're focused on industry, but this is going to have, impact across every industry,
Yeah, I think if you've got a tequila brand and this is what puts you out, you were going out anyway. It's the same thing with COVID. These breweries said, the on-premises struggle. You were going out anyway. It might be accelerating the process, which sucks, but that's
interesting you said, because one of my things in the poll was, what do you think is it going to have a negative impact on the hospitality industry? So these restaurants are already hanging on a thread. Think about like their food, their fruit, all that stuff that comes through their doors, right? Probably a lot of it is imported. Right now, I know some people do like local sources and stuff, but
to me, I just think it's a bit of a boogeyman thing. Like, I don't think it's a positive. I don't think it's going to help anything. But I got to pull up the stat. I think it's 52% of Brewers Association member breweries, the 52% of the production of those breweries is currently spoken for. So that means 48% isn't. That's beer industry specific, but that to me is a very real concern where there's going to be a beer bubble where the market crashes, not necessarily how much people are drinking. Breweries have been closing a little bit, but there's going to be a cliff's edge at some point where some of these breweries just cannot do it, which is going to affect a lot of jobs. So that's, not that tariffs are going to help, but, there are some real issues in the industry, beer specific, that I'll speak to, that people seem to be glossing over or trying to ignore, that, tariffs are just one more thing on top of that don't help. But like, it's not a healthy industry when almost 50% of the production space is sitting empty. So how do we fix that? Again, tariffs is one more thing that we don't need to deal with there. But just, because to me, that's what worries me about the industry is like, if that goes off a cliff, you're going to see a lot of people lose jobs pretty quickly. And that's something like that. It's 52%. That worries me.
Yeah, and interesting you say that, but that's maybe how you say reinvent yourself. Because, and then also if I have all this capacity, right?
Yeah.
Maybe my pricing is too high. Maybe I need to reduce what I'm charging, suppliers to use me as a contract brewer or whatever. And then also I know there's a lot of warehouse space too, because I've been helping a friend with finding warehouse space, but they still continue to take price increases and nickel and dime them. It's like, wait a minute, your warehouse isn't full. So I want to pay you 50% of that. So it's better to have 50% of what I'm going to pay you versus you're trying to get all this from me. So I think costs may come down in some situations because and maybe that helps or will help, that producer, like, okay, I'm 25% more here, but I took 25%, 30% my cost on the back end. So people have to be looked outside the box.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not as familiar with tequila. What's a good bottle of tequila go for on retail?
That's an interesting question, my friend. An additive-free, non-diffused quality tequila is probably $50 plus. But they're some of the big producers have started to they've just like whiskey they've compressed the category and brought their pricing down. So you're starting to see really good quality stuff around, $24.99 to $29.99 because everything's compressing down, right?
Yeah.
So with these tariffs, maybe that'll, like I was saying earlier, it'll stabilize where the pricing's coming down and keep it where it was at before. But the problem is there's a glut of tequila and there's a glut of whiskey that are sitting on the shelves at retail that are just not moving. That's
So
just
I
the
would
reality.
think to accelerate that inflection point. Again, COVID did that for beer,
Yeah.
but I would think if you've got I don't know, $45 bottle of tequila and you're a craft, mid-sized brand, and there's a large brand that's got equal quality at $25. Okay, if your bottle's at 45 and it's got to go to 55 because of the tariffs, you had a problem already. This is just accelerating you having to deal with that problem and maybe use it as a way to reinvent, because if you don't have the scale or the capacity of the larger brands and you can't get on the shelf for $30, that's a problem.
Well, we talk about push versus pull, right? And I mean, this is where push versus pull strategy comes into play. I have this tariff that's going to be put on my tequila that I'm bringing in the U.S. or my Canadian whiskey I'm bringing down from Canada. For years I would just get it on the shelf, do an incentive with my distributor, and the whole bit. I got to start talking to the consumer, do some tasting activations, maybe do some social media where I'm actually using influencers, actually research consumers to drive demand in those stores, or get people to pull them off the back bar. I'm going to have to be really good about getting on the menu to activate, because the only way you're going to win is that you have to have a pull strategy, or activate your brand with the consumer at the point of purchase where they're at. Because if people are just walking the shelf, they're not going to know who you are, and then B, you're going to put in the stratosphere price. Because I promise you this, I predict this. We'll follow this together. I think the big producers will, like you said, they will adjust their price. It's the small guys. They're going to have a more difficult time of doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I saw it firsthand with beer, specifically craft beer, when COVID hit. I think it accelerated a reckoning that was coming for a lot of breweries anyway. It just brought it sooner. And the ones that are, continuing to succeed, especially the craft ones, are the ones that took it, tried to use it as a way to improve and, better their brand strategy or their business model, which is really all you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at something right now online here. Let's see here.
But if you're a $55 bottle, when I drink spirits, it's more bourbon and whiskey. But if we've talked about this before, when you see an $80 bottle of bourbon, okay, and there's $35 Buffalo Trace, and their Buffalo Trace is as good or better, it's tough to get that $85 bottle of bourbon to pull. Now, if you use that in tequila, I don't think it's the tariffs that put you out. They didn't help. But your pricing strategy and your value prop was was really flawed to start with. This has just accelerated that reckoning.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just so far and wide. I'm looking at this right now, like some of the supply chain factors, right? So I'm thinking about like stuff coming in at the ports. There's probably going to be duties put on, in all these different ports as things come back and forth. So all that's going to be passed through. Transportation and shipping costs, like I was saying, I think there's going to be that's already up. I mean, you saw the port strike that this summer, which if you were a brand that were being imported in on these containers, that could have been devastating the industry. And that's still going to be negotiated. So now you're going to throw the port strike on top of it, plus tariffs on top of it. My gosh, I hate to be a downer here, but
I think there's always stuff. The war in the Middle East. Iran is messing with the Strait of Hormuz. We can't get in the Red Sea. Like, there's always stuff. And I've told this to some brands on the distro side and brands that I work with now. If you're selling 5,000 barrels of beer a year and you're blaming Hezbollah for your lack of pull, we've kind of lost the plot here at some point. Like, there's a reason that you're not pulling on taps in bars, and it's not because of Hezbollah or Iran or any of that.
There's a ceasefire, so maybe that'll help benefit those 5,000 barrels.
Like, there's always. I lived in LA, 20 minutes from Long Beach. That port shuts down once a year. It's just gonna. The stuff doesn't help, but I think the healthy approach would be to be like, this stuff's always gonna happen. If you've got that core stuff in line, if your pricing strategy is there for tequila, it's $30 a bottle and it's really good stuff, you're going to be able to find a way to adjust. Maybe you take a little bit of a hit, but if you're at $85, people tend to say, oh, the tariffs are what killed me. No, your brand strategy sucked. It's at $85 and no one's going to buy it because I can get just as good for $30. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to point to it and say, oh, that's why. It didn't help, but that's not really why.
Well, right. We always talk about it is who's your competitive set?
Yeah.
What channel do you want to be in? That'll inform your price. Well, we know that there's always going to be something that's going to happen in the world that's going to impact your cost of goods. Either they're going to go down or they're going to go up. Your demand's going to, if demand increases, maybe your price goes up. If limited supplies, you have the decision, do you make less but charge more? These are all factors that when you develop a commercial plan, or you're building your ABP, those things have to be really considered. What would you tell a supplier that's maybe a small to mid-sized supplier? What things would you tell them to do specifically, to prepare for this? Because I believe it's coming. I don't think it's a matter of if. I think it's January 1st or whenever the new administration comes in. I believe they're going to this is one of the things they ran on, right? I think they're going to impose it.
It's coming. I mean, get your shit together. If it's not together now, it's only going to be less together.
Yeah. Well, don't wait. Don't wait to see what happens. Start preparing now. Work with someone like yourself, Shane. Build it in the plan so you're ready, right?
And there's a couple brands I've done, I don't want to say financial analysis with, but we'll dig into their cost of goods because it does come into play with your brand strategy. Where you, like you said, where you're sitting at in the market, how you engage with consumers. I would just use it as whether you think the tariffs are going to affect you or impact you a lot or not, I would use it as an opportunity to look at your cost of goods. Start there. I'm guessing there's ways you could become more efficient. Like you said, I think there are a lot of brands who focus so much on margin, like it doesn't have any impact on sales velocity. When if you've got empty warehouse space or you've got production space that you're not filling, maybe you do take a lower price, a lower margin with higher velocity. It's a good opportunity to analyze what you're doing.
You speak my language. I sat inside distribution for 10 years. And, one of my main responsibilities was to manage inventory. And when inventory would hit what's called a 365-day list, it would fall on the dead and slow inventory list. And what that would mean is we'd have to make a decision. So as a distributor, we would actually take that our 50% of our FOB, discount it and move it out because it was sunk cost. We've already paid over 365 days. We paid the bank between 5 and 8% interest.
Yeah.
If you take that over the course of 12 months, you've already paid for that inventory. So the best thing we do is get some of our cash back to actually move it. But so many producers sit on their inventory because they say, I got to make, X% on this. I'm not going to go any lower. And I think they're not seeing the forest through the trees.
Well, it's an interesting point you bring up with inventory. I was talking with a cider brand this week about this. It is once you get on as a distributor, I'm very worried about inventory because, like you said, it's sitting there. Yeah. And it's cash tied up that I could be using on anything else. But once I make it to the point where I'm going to discount it to get it out, it's really hard to get me to bring in more inventory fresh. Even once I've cleared that out. And that used to be such a frustration with brands as they would say, we'd send them weekly inventory reports. And it's almost like half of them didn't read them. And it's like, do you need another order? Do you need it? No, I've got $100,000 of your inventory on the floor. We need to get it out. And once I've discounted it out, eaten money, like you said, I've tied up my cash to have it sit there for 6 months. Then I've eaten money to discount it out. And now you're asking me to bring more product in. So I think that's something that a lot of brands need to pay attention to. And it's just one of those things where you look at your distributor and how you're bringing value to their business and get inventory off the floor, in and out.
Yeah, it goes back to having really good activities, really pull. And with these tariffs coming, to your point, it should be a wake-up call. Wrap up your business, be better prepared. Don't fly by the seat of your pants with your business. Have a plan.
I mean, you made a good point. People like to flout the margins that they make. And it's like, well, how much are you selling? And the tariffs might be a good opportunity to examine that. Like maybe you take a little bit less margin to boost your rate of sale, because if other people are going to have to take more of an increase, you can find an advantage there. But rate of sale, and we talk about this all the time, rate of sale to me is king. I mean, you've got to make a margin, but having a 40% margin is meaningless if you're not moving product.
You can be proud of your brand. Hey, I have the world's best, X, and it's specially made. But if there's no demand for it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
because
and distributors want trucks full. They want trucks full. They want people out selling. They want displays built, and that's why it's key to look at your margin, because you can have a great margin, and if you're moving 15 cases a week, what's that get you?
Well, I think I know with these tariffs, if I was a supplier, a distributor, a retailer, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assess my current inventory I have on hand. If I'm a retailer, I'm going to look at my shelves, right? What do I have on hand? What is going to be impacted? If I'm a distributor, I'm going to look in the back of my warehouse. What's moving? What's not moving? If I'm a supplier, I'm going to look at my inventory too. I'm going to look at my competitive set. So those things you have to factor in. Now, look, let's talk about the U.S. made goods.
Yeah.
It may be like the guy I talked about said, hey, this is going to benefit me. Probably. What kind of U.S. made goods, like all these vodkas, these whiskeys, these beers, these craft beers, maybe this is a golden opportunity to actually, inject some fuel into the category. What things can they do?
Yeah, again, I mean, look at your competitive set. It's a good place. It's a good time to analyze your competitors' pricing, to pay attention to it. It must have been maybe a month ago. I was talking to a brand, second or third time we'd met, and I was asking about their cost of goods, and they said, well, it's within 10 cents. And I'm like, well, if you sell 100,000 cases this year, not knowing 10 cents one way or the other per case is 10 grand. And if you're not worried about 10 grand, why even bother? And I think it's easy to say, oh, it's just 10 cents. Look at your competitive sets. If a vodka that you're competing, or a tequila that you're competing against goes up $2 a bottle, is there an opportunity for you to come down $2 or $3 a bottle? Because now you've created a $5 differentiation.
I love that, because I was thinking about that. Obviously, in this economy, good, right, or indifferent, people are shopping price. Yeah. They are. I shop price. I don't care if outside of a few simple items, but most people will shop price. So I think it's really good strategy if you're looking who your competitive set is. Maybe they're being imported here, you're not, and it's like, hey man, this is an opportunity to actually talk about it on the shelf. Hey man, I'm $5 cheaper. I'm made in America. Let's build American jobs. That's the play they need to make. And I'm not attacking people in Mexico, Canada, Europe. I love all those brands too. I'm not an advocate for tariffs. But if I'm going to be in the situation and I'm American made, hey man, communicate it. Take advantage of it.
I know it's brands have had to deal with it in the UK. I've worked with a couple that have had to deal with the Brexit. Like they used to be able to just send, if you were a UK brand, you could very easily send products to Paris, let's say. And then Brexit happened, and it's a lot harder. It's affected their business, but I think you just have to adapt. It's interesting you talk about price. I posted a picture of a craft beer cooler on LinkedIn this week. I was talking about brand engagement, and someone made a very interesting comment on the post and said, this is the craft section. It almost gives me pause that one at the bottom is $5 cheaper a 4-pack than everything else. Because in the craft section, it almost sticks out that it's too cheap. And I don't know if it's the same way in tequila. Like if you've got a really well-made artisan tequila and it's almost too cheap, is there such a thing as too good to be true? Because it struck me that brands will talk about, oh, we've got really good craft beer. But if you come down too far on price point, it may almost cause a red flag for a consumer.
Oh, I think so. I worked for the Brown-Forman family for many years, and I'll bring it called Jack Daniels. And one thing they did very good at is a couple of times a year they would take a price increase. I'm not sure where it sits today, because it's been almost 20 years since I've been out of Brown-Forman. But I can tell you that they were very good about protecting their quality. It's like Rolex. You and I talk about Rolexes. What does Rolex do every year?
Well, they price increase a lot lately.
They take price increase, and they also select the people that can buy it, right?
Yeah.
That's the greatest situation you can be in. I mean, I think about a supplier, Moet Hennessy. They have some great brands. They have luxury brands. And maybe this is an opportunity. People aren't shopping price on those brands. So if you know your brand and people aren't shopping price, 25%, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to go buy my champagne, or my Dom Perignon, whatever it is. I'm going to buy it because that's my badge. So there's a lot of that as well, for sure, that has to be considered, because you can have a perceive of being cheap if you lower your price too low. I mean, I'm looking at brands that, and sorry, Sazerac, I love Buffalo Trace. Where's my Buffalo Trace? I love this brand. You can get this for $24.99 now.
Yeah.
I think that's too low, Sazerac. Take that price back up.
But if you're coming into the bourbon market, and we've talked about this, what is your value pitch? And it's the same in any market. What's your value pitch? Because you have, and I know it's harder in spirits, because with beer, it's easier to differentiate with quality. It's a little bit harder in spirits, but what's your value pitch? If I can go get that for $24.99 or even $29.99, if you're bringing a bourbon to market, you better have a damn strong value pitch to outperform that, because that's tough. As a consumer, I know that brand, I know how good it is, and for that price point, why would I switch to something else that's $49.99?
You definitely, and that comes down to, we talked about earlier, is the activation, liquid to lips. My value is, it's almost like the Pepsi challenge. You taste your product against other products, and you talk about the quality. I think the other value proposition is the producer. Who is the person behind the brand? Because people don't buy brands. Remember, they buy experiences, and they want to know the story behind the brand, because that's part of the brand identity that we've always talked about here. And I think this is a moment with the tariffs coming that people need to go look at everything we've been talking about for the last several months, to go back, look at push versus pull, look at, do you have a commercial strategy, ABP in place? Look at every facet of your business, how you can take maybe your costs out of the system, and then understand who your target market is. The time is now, because look, the reality is that there's not another election. New administration's coming in. They made it very clear to putting tariffs in place. If a miracle happens and they don't happen, great. But be prepared for it.
Makes it harder, right? I mean, I've thought about this a lot in the past. It always levels up, whether it's COVID or tariffs or inflation, whatever it is, it gets harder. But if you've got a strong brand strategy and business plan, there's ways to tweak it. Maybe it'll hurt a little, but there's always ways to adjust. I think it's an inflection point for the brands that don't know what their value prop is, or don't know their cost of goods, or maybe it's just not as locked in and tightened up as it should be.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to do that. To me, it's like, it'd be like if you're overweight and you go to the doctor and say, look, you got to lose weight or you're going to have a heart attack here. All right, this is a point. I've got to get it together or not here. I know there's consequences if I don't. If not now, when?
Look, I did a post this morning unrelated to this whole thing. Other thing that was related to is, and I had headgear as a kid.
Okay.
I had to wear headgear, and I had a 4-second scene with Anthony Michael Hall. He's in the car, and the girl slaps him, and he's having nightmares about his headgear, and he's talking to his mom, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that there's going to be pain felt, but from that pain that people are going to feel, they're going to grow from it. Your point is, you talk about COVID, is a great example. But prepare for that pain. Prepare for the headgear that's going to be put on your head that you're going to have to suffer through. Minimize your suffering. Have some ibuprofen along the way. And the ibuprofen is having a plan for it to take advantage of it. And for those that U.S.-made goods, make sure you get all your materials made in the U.S. and minimize your impact, and then talk about it and take full advantage of it. And those goods that are coming to the U.S., maybe your price was too high. Maybe you can weather the storm, by bringing it in. Everybody has to do their part, in this thing, but there's going to be some pain felt, to your point, Shane. But if you prepare for that pain, guess what? You can weather this.
Yeah, and life just has, and especially in business, but life has a way of weeding you out. Like, you pass one challenge, there's going to be another one. So the people that say, oh, the tariffs put me out, I mean, you were probably just kind of looking for a reason to go out anyway. It's just, it sucks. We talked about it. I sold a beverage distribution business, and I came into consulting and thought I'd hit the ground running overnight, and it's tough. You just have to fight through it, because if you really want to do it, life's going to try and weed you out for the people that don't. And I just think it's it's not great. It's a challenge with the tariffs, but it's an opportunity and an inflection point to tighten up your business. And if you're really committed to it, find ways to try and turn it into an advantage, or just give yourself a boost when other brands aren't.
Yeah, I love that, Shane. I don't really have any other thoughts in this discussion. I think that was a really good summation of what folks need to do. I think we do need to talk about it. I don't shy away from it.
Sure.
And I think that we need to plan. Because if you don't have a plan, you're not going to get through the pain, and there isn't going to be any growth. You're just going to be sitting on the sideline going, "What happened to my business?" So don't do that. Start to talk about it and start to plan against it. Any closing thoughts, Shane?
Yeah, just please God, know your cost of goods. Use this as an opportunity. Tariffs or not. I mean, like I said, I think it was a few months ago now, I was talking to an orange juice brand, and they were like, well, 20 cents this way. No. That's massive when you're selling it for $3 a bottle.
Yeah.
20 cents. So just use it as an opportunity. Know your cost of goods. Just start there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Know your cost of goods. All right, Shane. Well, it's great catching up with you. I hope everybody's had a great holiday weekend. We'll see you all next week.
Yeah, be here.
It's good.
Yeah, no, that was good. It was like I've been working with a couple brands lately